everybody. We're back here on deck. It's September. Christine told me, because I'm newer to the Cape, that it's shoulder season.
Shoulder season.
So that means that most of the tourists have left.
Yes.
And those of us who live here are here.
Can reclaim our beach and go swimming in the warm water.
And get a parking space.
Get a parking space.
At CVS,
Travel, move about the cabin freely.
Right. How do you like it when the season's over here?
This is my very favorite time of year.
It is.
September, and I try to swim right up until Columbus Day. But
you do? Where do you swim? Ocean?
Who's swimming anymore though, because of the sharks? So I go in about 8 feet from shore, and very nervously, and then go back. East Sandwich, and
there was a
Sandy
shark
Neck
sighting in Sandwich.
There was
I heard.
earlier in the season.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, I'm going to give you an invitation. You can come swim at my pool. No sharks, a blow-up alligator.
We live almost on Mashpee, Waquoit Lake, so I'll be doing a lot of canoeing next summer, I think, and swimming in the lake.
That's really awful about the sharks, didn't you think?
It is, but apparently it's cyclical and not a new thing. I mean, it was 80 years. We've been more aware. They're talking about drones and somehow corralling beaches or keeping sharks out. I don't know.
It's scary. So be careful in the water, even though probably most of us are not going in the water at this time anymore. Yeah?
I won't say that. That was poor taste.
What were you going to say? They could eat what?
The tourists.
Eat the tourists. We need the tourists here in Cape Cod.
Don't eat the locals.
So what? You've been doing a lot of shows over this summer.
I did
fat-ass cancer bitch.
Cancer bitch. I did. I had a nice run of shows up and down the Cape, and my favorite prop I need to show you again because I'm still thrilled about it.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't read my phone. Excuse me. Let me take out my pince-nez. Look at that.
Well, you look
nice?
very
fancy. Isn't that very distinguished?
Yes, you look very distinguished. I like those.
Making the pince-nez great again. And then, but the best part is you take them off like that, and then they slide in to this handy little thing on the back of your phone.
Oh,
and they don't fall out, so you always have them.
I got to get one of those.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's my favorite gadget of the summer. I had a bunch of great shows. I voted in the primary.
Speaking of voting, and everybody has got to get out and vote for the midterms. But before we talk about that, we have to talk about this Brett Kavanaugh because I'm interested in what you think, but now I know what you think.
Well, he looks like this happened to you. What happened to Christine Blasey Ford happened to you.
It happened
to me.
It happened to me.
I know it did.
It's happened probably to most women, or many women.
That you've been attacked or threatened or jumped on. I could provide my spreadsheet to show you.
Well, I don't have a spreadsheet. But
you need one. Start making a spreadsheet. Start tallying the Me Too events in your life. Holy crap.
Yeah.
So we are all Christine, and this guy, I believe her.
I believe her too, but I want to ask you this, and this is not necessarily how I feel, but should this man be punished for something that he did when he was a kid and she was a kid, if he has a clean record from then on?
Possibly if he fessed up and apologized and made amends. Right. The fact that there's an industry now devoted to threatening her life.
That's unbelievable.
And,
that is amazing.
And supporting and exhorting this nominee is the problem. And until that is fixed, until people listen, until the FBI decides to investigate a Supreme Court nominee, like, FBI, we don't do that sort of thing. It's not important enough. It's not our bailiwick. That's bullshit.
Well, it would kind of be hard for the FBI to investigate him because people would wonder why the FBI didn't investigate Donald Trump for doing worse things. You don't want to. That is a house of cards. And this is simply another symptom. Part of me is like, oh yes, bring it on. Make me some popcorn, please, because I am enjoying this show. Except we're experiencing it, and this is our country. This is our great nation, and it's so embarrassing. It's so embarrassing. And when my little 5-year-old granddaughter says to me, "I hate Trump. I hate Trump," I know she doesn't know what she's talking about.
But what a way for kids to even think about the president of our United States. I don't get it. I don't get why the man is still in office.
Because young people, you are not voting.
I don't think that's the only reason.
That's a huge reason. That our electorate are the greater part of the constituency of the voting population of the United States are older and more conservative, and the people who voted for this man and are now like rabidly supporting him because there's a desperation happening in the party. I think we're on the cusp of great change, which won't happen unless younger people vote. People who have been disenfranchised vote. People don't think their vote matters.
Well, you know, I said to my husband, so what do you think's going to happen after all this? And he said he'll be nominated. And I thought to him, I said to him, why are you saying that? He said, because nobody does anything about anything terrible that's happening in government. And that's a very sad statement.
But I think they're beginning to do something.
You do?
Now. Look! The midterms. I mean, I think there is a blue wave, and I say that so cautiously. But indicators are, and the people who voted for Trump. I mean, the poor people affected by the tariffs. The people who were hoping for great change are not getting great change, and
that's for sure.
And they're just getting shafted, which was his sneaky plan all along.
I just ordered the book Fear. And I'm interested to be reading that book and see what happens. And this isn't a political show, so we have to move on.
Everything is political now.
Everything
is political. There is so much at stake.
So much. With that, we're going to take a break. Oh, I forgot to bring my bumper sticker that I had. My daughter brought it for me, and it looks like a regular presidential bumper sticker, and it says, anyone else.
Oh, do you know what my favorite is? I saw recently. I love that. Although I that sounds almost reckless. But my favorite was a little oblong that said "Tuck Frump."
I like it. We'll be back in a second.
Dear Editor, November 7th, the first Tuesday of the month. I dropped into the Community Health Center of Cape Cod in Mashpee to see the Mashpee Substance Use Task Force in action. Professionals volunteering their expertise. Impressive, outstanding.
If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, help is here. Drop-in night at the Community Health Center in Mashpee is the first Tuesday of the month from 4 to 7 p.m. and brings together local treatment and recovery professionals.
We're back, and this time we're back with a more serious subject than we usually talk about.
We were just fairly serious.
We were talking about Brett Kavanaugh, so that was very serious. But we're going to leave him aside for other problems that we have, a more local problem. We're going to talk about water quality in Mashpee, and how we can help solve some of the problems. Now, interesting thing to me before I introduce you is I never really gave this a lot of thought. One day, a friend of mine said to me, "You don't drink Mashpee water, do you?" And I was...
Did I say that?
No. Okay. But someone did, and I got very nervous. Then I had the pleasure of being with my friend, Nancy Curran. She was my yoga teacher for many years. And you told me that you had just approached the Save the Popponesset committee.
Yep, Save Popponesset Bay.
And you had some concerns that you wanted to talk about with the water. And when I heard that, I started realizing that all these concerns were very valid, and it was really time to start paying attention. After Nancy, we have a man from the Waquoit Research Reserve, Jim Rassman. And we're so happy to have you because I drive by that almost every day for some reason or another. And I always say to myself, I'm going to turn in.
We were just talking about this
Really?
before we
What
got
were you
here,
saying?
I think that's a very common comment we hear.
Oh.
So people come by and they think it's part of Woods Hole Research, institution. They think they can't come down there but it's not. It's open to the public, and when people come in, they're often very impressed, and they're like, "Wow, I didn't know this was here all the time." So come by sometime.
I will. I think it's a good place to bring kids, right?
It's a fantastic place to bring kids. There's lots of programming, but just the place itself is beautiful.
It's nice to look at. Open at Thanksgiving?
Open all year round, actually, yeah. So come by in the wintertime. It's
Absolutely.
beautiful.
So tell us what you told me about what's going on here.
Well, I've been paddleboarding and sailing in the waters around here for years now. And especially the last 2 years, I've noticed a big decline, especially in Popponesset Bay, because that's one of the bays I paddle in. But I also paddle a lot over at Waquoit and the 3 bays over in Barnstable. And lots of algae bloom, lots of decreased water visibility, less fish. And I wanted to look at what we could do about it. So I talked to one of the board members of, say, Popponesset Bay, and she said, well, why don't you come and talk to the board? So I contacted someone over at Waquoit Research, and Joan Mueller is the education coordinator, and she came by with me, and she did a lot of what Jim's going to do today, talk about the research and what we know about the waters, because Waquoit is one of the most researched bodies of water in the country.
In the country?
In the country.
In the world,
In the
actually.
world.
I thought at
Your
the Cape.
backyard.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
cool.
So what a great resource we have right here. And I also live part of the year in Florida, where there's been a lot on the news lately about algae blooms because of Okeechobee water.
Wait 1 second.
Yep.
Do you know what an algae bloom is?
Sorta. Jim?
All right, so essentially it's very simple. So, there's nutrients in the water that's running the whole food chain, and that's normal in any water body, fresh water or salt water. But it's like having your aquarium set up and it's all perfect, and then you overfeed your fish and you just keep adding nutrients, and it all turns green. Or you come back from vacation, you throw those things in, and you come back and it's all full of algae. It's just that there's an excessive amount of nutrients. The algae essentially responds to that and grows, beyond normal and can cloud the water, and you get it, essentially you can't even see through the water anymore. And that's very, the algae's out there all the time doing its thing. It's part of the food chain, but when you get too much nutrients down from the watershed, essentially coming down from everything that's washing into that body of water, then that algae responds to that and goes crazy.
And it looks ugly in the water, right?
We can talk a little bit about what happens to that, but
Okay.
that's essentially the background of what a bloom is.
Okay, so
So I'm seeing more of that while I'm out there
Yeah.
paddling, and I'm thinking, what do we do about this? And say Popponesset Bay is a great organization. They've been around for a lot of years, and they were really open to learning about what they can do as far as the water quality, as well as the Popponesset spit has been a big focus of their program as well. So they are now going to be putting together a committee, and I am part of that. And we're going to look at what we can do in educating the community about, because it's a big subject, it's a big problem. It's I just recently read it's in all 50 states. There's algae bloom problems. They're not only in freshwater and saltwater, they're starting to show up in drinking water too, sources. So what can we do about it? A lot of people want to just say, the argument in Florida is, well, algae blooms have been around for a long time. A red tide is just part of the natural thing. But as Jim just said, when you have too many nutrients going into the water, that forces a bigger problem. And that's what's happened in Florida right now.
And why is an algae bloom bad?
All right, so we'll talk a little bit about as it applies to the Cape. Popponesset, Waquoit, 3
this
bays.
is like science
Those areas.
101.
So essentially, our embayments, our estuaries, are very shallow water. I mean, if you're ever out there, that's what makes them so nice. You can shellfish in them, you can swim in them, kite surf, those type of things, because they tend to be very shallow. For example, Waquoit Bay, although it's over 800 acres in size, it's less than 3 feet deep on average. If you put it all together. So most places you could stand out there. If you looked at the total area. And they tend to have narrow openings to the sea. If you think about the openings where the spit that Nancy was talking about, or in Waquoit. And so there's these big bodies of water that are very shallow. So they warm up fairly quickly. All that nutrients come down and get trapped in a relatively, shallow area. There's lots of sunlight, and that algae bloom goes crazy, and it actually just makes the water impenetrable. You can't see down in the water. We should be able to see the bottom. In a healthy bay, you should be able to kayak or be out there in your boat and be looking straight down in 3, 5, 6 feet of water. You should be able to see the bottom. But if you think about it, you can't see the bottom in any of these bays. And even though that's only 5 or 6 feet of water, that's not very much. And it's that algae just completely clouds that water, that microalgae in the water column. And really the long-term problem is down there should be eelgrass. There should be a plant called eelgrass. You'll see it washed up on the beach. It's a big, long, brown. You'll see it brown. And of course, when it's growing, it's green. That's rooted. It's a rooted plant. And it would be like our rainforest. If you went down there normally, when you snorkel through that, that's where all the baby shellfish, all the scallops would be attached to. All the baby bait fish would be down there. The crabs would be down there. That would be what a healthy bottom would look like. But because the light can't get down anymore because it's so clouded, all that eelgrass dies. So in Waquoit Bay, there used to be about 500 acres of eelgrass, and now there's 0. So it's all been lost. So that's 500 acres of our underwater habitat that's gone. And what it's been replaced by is just these big mats of macroalgae, the algae you can pick up and see, the stuff that washes up on the beach. That stuff can survive in lower light conditions. And so that's kind of on the bottom, and the water's all clouded, in between. And there's nowhere for the young fish to live. There's nowhere for the scallops to attach to. And that's why we see some of the problems that Joan's talking about. Plus, that stuff rots every year in the wintertime and turns into a black mayonnaise-y muck. And
black mayonnaise muck, that sounds so appealing.
And it's exactly like that. I wish I brought a jar of it, because
Yeah.
it's exactly like that. I saw Joan shake her head, because that's the thing people smell. It washes up on the beaches, those type of things. And that can drive a lot of other problems, which we'll get to, when that stuff rots. But I'll go back to what Joan was talking about in terms of her experience.
Okay, he keeps calling you Joan because he's thinking
Nancy,
of Joan,
sorry.
but it's okay. It's okay. People keep calling me Shelley. Anyhow,
Okay,
so we got problems.
and we can do something about it. And so that's my big mission, is to see if we can have more conversations. And I'm so thankful that you pushed me to do this. My shy button said no at first, but then I'm here. And
Shelley's so good about that.
and so, what can we do about it? And we can have effect. We are the reason. I don't want to say we are the reason, but human beings' lifestyle, just being on this planet, there are more of us on Cape Cod than there were in the 1950s when there was eelgrass in Waquoit and in Popponesset Bay. And I don't see it in Popponesset Bay. I know they're not over there researching, but I don't see it there. I see the brown mucky stuff that he's talking about, and I see the cloudy water, but I'm not, every so often I do see a sandy piece of water section, but most of the time it's that brown mucky stuff over in Popponesset Bay now. And so what can we do about it? Well, we're doing the creation of the problem, so let's talk about how we can change that as well. And there's 5 things that have been sort of designated the issues. Number 1 is our waste product. And then side note number 2 would be the animal waste product. We don't have a lot of agricultural land around us where cows are the problem, but we have a lot more people, and we're on septic systems. And so if your septic system is healthy and it's doing well and it doesn't have a lot of leakage, great. So we can look at that. We can make sure we're having our septic checked, that we're having pumped.
Yeah, we did ours last year.
Great.
Just
Every
saying.
3 to 5 years is the suggestion, I think. Is it 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, it's even a little more, it can be as
much
quick
as-
as 2 years, depending
Okay.
on the number of people you have in the house.
Yeah, and how, now some people are here for just the summer, so they're using for 2 months, so they wouldn't have to pump as frequently, but if you're year-round or you have a large house with a lot of people in it, you'd want to have it looked at. I've also read, there's a lot of talk about additives that you can put in, but I've read that don't put the additives in. You want to let it be in its natural state. Fertilizer is one that we can all have effect, especially if we're living right by the water.
All those lush lawns.
Yeah, and Capescape is a beautiful thing. Most people move down here because they love the way the Cape looked and felt. And Capescape is natural. But then we came down and we wanted it to look like it did up in our homes in the suburbs, and we put in lawns and didn't think about the results of the fertilizers. I know Falmouth right now is doing, they have
a fertilizer bylaw.
Yeah, they have a bylaw.
Oh, really? That
So-
says,
That essentially reduces the amount of fertilizer and what types of fertilizer. It essentially requires you to use organic fertilizer that breaks down instead of the chemical-based fertilizers, the artificial ones.
So yeah, there's a difference between a slow growth and a fast growth fertilizer. Slow growth would be an example of organic, or just the clippings off of your grass. Leave them there. Cut your grass a little longer would be helpful. I know that they've met, I think you guys did some programs with landscapers to
Sure.
try.
We just had a program this week, and we're having one next week again, looking at on how we're managing our homescapes essentially from both a nitrogen standpoint, but also a resilience standpoint, being ready for storms and things like that. So it's all
The
kind of tied
landscaping
together.
around Falmouth Town Hall is a great example.
Yeah.
It's xeriscaping and capescaping.
So,
It's
yeah.
all grasses and Rosa rugosa and gravel.
Yeah,
And
yeah. And so rain gardens are another way we can affect, because let's say you do live on a marshland or near the estuary or just by the ocean or a pond, there's always the runoff issue. So if I could go back to fertilizing, not as much, less is more, and not 3 days before rain, I think it's the recommendation. So if you put it down and it rains the next day, it's going to wash out really quickly.
Right.
But if you have then a rain garden where the washout comes off the roof, off your driveway towards your water, and you have some kind of a deep, like 18 inches, I think, or 2 feet is the recommendation.
So essentially, it's just to catch that water,
Yeah.
slow it down, and you have plants in it that are pulling up a lot of the nutrients before it goes beyond that. And the other thing is, it can really serve a lot of wildflowers in there, pollinators, so you can kind of get multiple use out of it, and you don't have to cut that area.
Right.
So it kind of saves you on that end too. So
Yeah. So what else can we do?
I'll pick up after our pets.
Yep. Pick up after all your animals, because we don't have cows, but we do have a lot of dogs, and cats. And, so whatever you can do to keep that managed rather than washed off again into the water.
I love we're talking about using all this sort of coded talk.
Right.
yeah, you have to eventually have to get to it.
Folks, we're talking about poop.
We were talking out there before we came in, and Jim said, poop's going to come up. So that's a big part of it. And just thinking about runoff in general, what other things that you do. I was reading recently about washing your own car at home. Well, yeah, I used to love to do it.
Yeah.
But car washes now are required to manage their wastewater because of the runoff, because it's not only nitrogen, it's also phosphorus. That would
It's
be
all those
another.
outdoor showers too.
Outdoor showers would be another great thing to consider, using phosphorus-free products.
Isn't that the law? I mean, aren't you supposed to?
So essentially,
Hard to
we have
please.
kind of done a better job on phosphorus. So I don't want to make too complicated, but Nancy's right. There's nitrogen, there's phosphorus. There's many nutrients. If you're thinking about your garden, it's the same thing you'd put on your garden.
Right.
When you look on a bag of
Right.
fertilizer, it's NPK, and it's those same things that go in that can result in growth in the water too. So anything you can reduce. But we've done a better job
Right.
on phosphorus, and phosphorus tends to be associated with our ponds. So if people talk about pond problems, a lot of times that is phosphorus coming from runoff from our own homes, but also what we're using in the products, our washing products. We have reduced, overall in the country, the amount of phosphorus in there. It still can be an issue though. And the answer-
Nitrogen, too much nitrogen.
So
I read that.
Essentially, the main thing is the concept is that people often don't get is whatever we're doing on the land is connected to the water body. Whatever, all that water that's coming off our lawns or coming off our car washes or coming out of our septic system is going somewhere, and it ends up in those water bodies. And it kind of concentrates, it's a watershed. So it's shedding the water off the land into Waquoit, into Popponesset, into a Santuit pond or wherever it happens to be, and it's concentrating that. So you got to think about everything in your lifestyle is affecting that water body. So Nancy listed a bunch of them already, but just how we live, right? The size of houses we live in, how we choose to eat, how much energy we're using. There's a lot of nitrogen that's also being deposited through the air. About 50% of it actually is falling through the air shed. It's coming on these water bodies, and that's from fossil fuel, burning mostly in the Midwest that drifts all the way up to New England and is slowly landing there. So anything we can do to reduce our fossil fuel use has a huge impact on waste, essentially on nutrient input in these water bodies. And in fact, the good news is, I don't know if you look at it, good news, bad news, is we kind of bottomed out with these water bodies. They're kind of loaded with nutrients right now. There had been a little bit of improvement over the last few years when we're watching the nitrogen levels in there, and some of that's attributed to changing fuel sources actually in Midwestern coal plants to natural gas. So it does work, so you can see it, but it's everything we do. It's not just the simple things, right? So you got to think about everything you do, and wherever you can make those adjustments, it can pay off, right? And so you hear lots of, as we move forward, lots of talk about septic. That's really direct. That's really direct. But a lot of that we can't control. Those are political decisions. We can be politically active. We can support those decisions when they come up. But in the meantime, some of the things Nancy's talking about, we can do right now. We can use less fertilizer. We can, watch the products we use. Those types of things are meaningful as well.
There's a wonderful website, n-print.org.
Okay, we'll put that up.
It's for a nitrogen footprint. And you go on and you answer some questions, and it just will quickly tell you.
I have a nitrogen footprint too. I have a carbon footprint, and I have a nitrogen footprint.
And they're related though, so that's good. You don't have to worry. They're kind of tied into each other.
They are. And so things like, where I scored the highest was I have grandchildren in California, and I fly out there.
Sure.
So every time I get on a plane, and then and for work, I take people to Europe, and there's another 6 hours of time of flight. So that's where my footprint went really big. Where I got low score is the fact that I eat organic food, and I'm mostly a vegetarian. I do seafood and some eggs. So that shrunk it. So you can do things like that.
So we can
do
go
this before the next show. We need to go on and get our grades.
And we have to go to Europe with Nancy and Don to reduce our footprints, I think. Now, we only have a few minutes left, so I want you to tell us about Waquoit and what we can do there.
So,
I can't say that word.
The Waquoit Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve is one of 29 in the country. So every coastal state has one except Connecticut and Louisiana. They're working on theirs right now. So,
losers.
They're making it. But so it's a program that's run through NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. You hear a lot about hurricane research and things like that. Same administration runs ships out of Woods Hole. But they really don't have places, right, that if you think about it, to do the research. So they partner with states. So in our case, it's the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation. So if you go to South Cape Beach State Park, if you go to Washburn Island, if you go to Quashnet Woodlands, you're on the reserve. So we have about 1,200 acres of land, and our partner is State Parks, and about 2,000 acres of water in the reserve. And really, it serves two purposes. It's a place-based research. It's a living laboratory where researchers can come and do research. And we happen to be very fortunate in that we're in Falmouth. So, the headquarters is in Falmouth, right on Route 28 there in East Falmouth. And so we get a lot of researchers from Woods Hole Oceanographic and MBL and Tufts and MIT and Boston University. So, we're a rich, research institution that way. So a lot of researchers are coming there because they don't have access. Those universities and even some of the institutions don't have a place to go. So we can get them on the water, we can get them out in the salt marshes, we can get them into the forests. And so that's happening. But the other thing that's happening is it's an outdoor classroom for little kids all the way up through, all the way your whole life. So there's public programming there, a lot of public programming. In the summer times, there's lots of programming for youth. A lot of the schools come, most of the schools on the Cape come, during the school year. So, but it's also open to the public all the time.
I was telling you before the show, I drive by there all the time, and I never know if I can go in or not.
And the great thing is there's something for everybody because we're in a historic building, so people sometimes come for that. We have osprey nests right there, so people will come, birders will come to see that. Boaters will come, of course, because the water part of the reserve, or camp on Washburn, or go swim at South Cape Beach. But encourage you to stop by the headquarters there. It's the gray buildings behind the stone wall, look a little imposing. It's open. Come by, see the visitor center, grab some pamphlets. I brought some with me today, so I can leave them with you.
Great.
And learn a little bit about it. But it's also this great research institution, and we're trying to answer a lot of the questions, and we're trying to answer the question of where the problem came from, and we have done a good job on that
Right.
now. We've talked about that today. And we're trying to answer, moving forward, what can we do about it? We've talked about our personal lifestyles. We're also working with the towns, with coastal decision makers on what we can do at that level. Growing shellfish or putting in different types of septic systems, or the sewering issue. Obviously that works. It's just very expensive. So we're working at all levels trying to solve the problem. But the first thing was to find out, educate people about it, and
Right.
then work towards solutions.
And my most important takeaway from what you're saying is just the thought of realizing that what we're doing is affecting
Absolutely.
something else, which I don't think about very often,
Right.
to tell you the truth. And I think it's so important because it seems like pretty soon people wouldn't be able to swim if we didn't do
Well,
stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was just sitting here thinking. We really didn't talk about how the problem is manifesting right now. And when that brown sludge dies out in the winter, in the death process, it's going to use oxygen, which is going to decrease the amount of oxygen in water, which means anything needing oxygen, like a fish or shellfish as well, I
Absolutely.
think, will die off. And then what's happened in Florida is also in that process, there's some toxins that sometimes come out of the process, and that is not good for us if we're in contact with it or breathe it. So
Is that what the red tide is on the west coast of Florida?
Absolutely.
yeah.
Oh.
And then there's blue-green algae on the east coast, and it's
Oh.
both from the same source, Okeechobee's
Whatever.
water.
Yeah, yeah.
That has been polluted by too much nitrogen for a number of reasons. And I'm not going to go long-winded into that, but the problem is that our lifestyles are going to be affected by it. We all love living on Cape Cod because of the water that we get to play in and enjoy and just look at and sit on our decks and have a cup of coffee and breathe that beautiful salty air. But if we are breathing in a toxin, we're not going to go out there anymore. And then our lifestyles are going to be affected. So why not move ahead of that and look at how our lifestyle can change that and help so that the fish are alive. And they've had huge kill-offs in Florida, just thousands and thousands of tons of fish.
Okay, I have to ask you something. Can you come back in the spring so we can talk about this some more? Because we're out of time, but it's really interesting to me. I'm not a science person, but I think this is fascinating.
Love to. You know my schedule.
I do know your schedule, and you're here all the time, right?
Yeah,
All the
absolutely,
time. Well,
absolutely. And I mean, that's it. Is really what type of place do we want to live in? So we can come back and talk about.
I want to live in a healthy place, and we want our grandchildren to live in a
we
healthy
sure do.
place, for sure.
And it's not too late. I mean, we've caused the problem, but we can also solve the problem. I mean, that's.
I
really
feel
what
the
it's
same
about.
way
So,
about
yeah.
Donald Trump. And it's time to leave. But thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Well, interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And we'll be back next month with a very interesting topic. See you then.